Hello, good evening, Mr. Aaker. It's a great privilege to have you today here. Thank you so
Well,
much.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And a very warm welcome to all the people who have joined us today on various channels. It is one of the most extraordinary episodes that we are hosting on BuzzOnEarth TV. And idea is to dispel a lot of myths around branding and marketing. And here we have one of the most important luminaries of the world of branding and marketing, the father of modern branding himself, Mr. David Aaker, who needs no introduction as such. And it is a proud privilege for us to host him today. So thank you, sir, for joining us.
Glad to
Great.
do it.
So here we have, as I was telling you, there is a lot of, I would say a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to the purpose-driven branding approach. And I'm jumping straight onto the topic because a lot of people have various understandings around the word purpose itself. For some of them, it is something which is beyond their business, something which is beyond profit, something which is beyond the scope of what the regular business is supposed to do. So I would like to start with the question, because your recent most book was about the purpose driven branding. So how would you like to share your experience on how you were compelled to write that book? What inspired you to get started on that topic in first place?
Well, what I'm really doing is to trying to make social programs and social effort more effective, because I think they're so important. There's enormous challenges facing society. There's the climate change, the inequality, the need for food and water in some sectors, the need for healthy living all over the place, and government can't do it all. And so business really needs to help. And I've really recognized that fact. But what I bring to that challenge is to introduce branding, because branding, I think, is such an integral part of it. And what I think that has been now accepted is that that people ought to try to have the social programs integrated into the business strategy, so that it helps their business, and so it's not just a dead drain on their profits and take money away from other places where it needs to go to make the business thrive. And so that's others have said the same thing, but what they haven't thought about is how to do it. They've thought, well, you should make your offering more climate sensitive or more healthy, or you should save money because of reduced energy. But the real opportunity is to develop a social effort that helps the business, that's integrated into the business. And if you do that, then the social program is more likely to thrive. It's more likely to get resources from the business. It's more likely to get an endorsement from the business. And the reality is that most businesses need what a social program can provide. They need energy. They need an image lift. They need an engagement lift. And if you make soap, or if you make if you're a bank, it's pretty hard to get those things into your brand. And yet they're really the key to growing your business. And so a social program can provide that. And if you have take Dove soap, for example, that created the Real Beauty program. And that really influenced the lives of literally hundreds of millions of women and girls. It changed their life. They gave them self-esteem. They gave them a way to cope with the social pressures of the day. It's really phenomenal. And it got so much attention that it drove the sales of Dove soap from 2.4 billion to 6.5 billion.
Absolutely.
It was all driven by that social program. And so when Dove says we have to downsize, we have difficult economic time,
Hmm.
nobody around Dove says, well, let's kill the social program because that costs a lot of money. Because the social program is the driver of Dove soap.
Absolutely, and very well put. And this is one of the most, I would say, bright example when it comes to the power of a social program in driving purpose before, carving the strategy for business. So another point which I'm really tempted to make here is you have been writing so many books on branding. I think you have written more than 18 books on the subject. And one of my most favorite books was one of the early ones that was the 20 principles that you have laid out. And one of the things in that was if you have an innovation, brand it. And I really, think that is the same thinking which continues to apply when it comes to these new age companies that are working on innovation and coming up with new solutions for problems like sustainability and climate change. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, my 18 books weren't all on branding. My early books were on market research, on advertising, on business strategy, and consumer protection, multivariate analysis, and then I got into branding when during the actually way back to the early 90s when business was finding that their avenues to growth were really not effective, and they were destroying brands in the process. So they said, well, we got to go back to the basics and build our brands. And nobody really had defined what brand equity was. So in my first book, that's what I did. And brand equity to me is three things. It's first of all relevance, which
Yes.
means the brand needs to be visible. There has to be awareness of it, and it has to be credible. It has to be regarded as an option. The second is image. And brand equity has to contain not only image about functional attributes, but also emotional factors as well, and personality factors and value factors. And the third element is brand loyalty or brand engagement. And it to have a successful, strong brand, you need a portion at least of your customer base that's highly loyal. And then when I after I did that, then people say, okay, we agree, but how do you do it? And then I developed a second book called Building Strong Brands that argue that if you want to manage your brand, you have to realize, first of all, that it's not a three-word phrase. It's multidimensional. There's 8 or 10 dimensions to your brand, and 3 or 4 are going to be the most important, and you have to do that. And the second thing is, I said that it's not a checklist kind of thing. You don't worry about having a box. What is the attributes? What are the benefits? What are the market? You instead said, what do you want your brand to stand for? And you identify what works for you in the context that you're in, and you create your own boxes. And that was the essence of the model that I developed to guide people to build brands.
And if we were to talk about some of the most nascent organizations that are in the process of building their brand, what will be your advice to them? How do they get started?
Well, I think that you have to start by saying, what do I want my brand to stand for? And that usually involves for a new organization, a new business, it involves knowing what the strategy of the business is. What is its value proposition? Why is it going to be differentiated from others? And if you're really good, as I point out in the book you referred to, which is called Owning Game-Changing Subcategories, is you'll have some must-haves in which ends up you're the only relevant option because the others don't have that. But nevertheless, you want to find out what elements of your brand is going to be differentiate, it's going to resonate, and it's going to be credible. And And it's really important to know that, and that really ties in with what is your brand strategy. It's pretty hard to do that unless you have a brand strategy. And you have to, if you're starting out, it's going to be highly likely your brand strategy is going to change over time, and your brand may need to change over time. But it's very important to get it right at the beginning, and then you can surround those brand pillars, I call them. You can surround that with a purpose or a mission, which gives an umbrella motivation to guide and inspire. And you might want to have a vision that sort of gives you an idea of what is your sort of emotional thrust of your business. And you might want to have a tagline, which is a device to communicate the essence of your business to customers and to the external world. And so you need kind of a package of concepts, and the labels aren't so important, but the idea of getting it right is.
This is very interesting because most of the companies that are in the nascent stages often get too bogged down by this whole pressure of trying to build the business and then trying to capture some markets and trying to create all the other strategies that are important from the business standpoint, and keep branding at a back burner, thinking that so far we are not recognized enough, so maybe we can tackle branding at a later stage. So that is why, given the era which we are in, where the consumers are so aware, they are so much connected with companies that are having a defined purpose, companies who stand for something. So how would you advise such organizations that are at the helm of starting up and that are at the helm of going out in the market?
Well, I think that companies that are in that place have got a lot of challenges. They need to get the product right. They have to test it. They have to prove it in the marketplace. They have to gain money. They have to have motivated employees and so on. And so the problem is that when you have all those must-do things, it's really hard to is really hard to factor in marketing. So you need to take a special effort to get access to some marketing talent, or to have some marketing talent on your team. And as the strategy is evolving, you want to simultaneously be building a brand strategy, and be thinking about what are these pillars that are going to demonstrate differentiation, resonance, and credibility. And yeah, I think it's very dangerous to ignore that until it comes time to go to market. Oh, well, we need a brand, and it's much better if you can have a brand develop simultaneously that can guide and inspire.
And I would also be taking some of the questions that we have coming in. So one question is this: considering the global shift towards sustainability, how do you envision purpose-driven branding playing a role in addressing environmental and social challenges? Can it be a force for positive change on a larger scale?
Well, my take is that organizations will have a social effort, and they need to communicate that social effort. And it's very hard to communicate if you just have a budget that's allocated to grants, volunteering, energy goals, ESG reports. That's almost impossible to communicate. You look the same as every other organization, and it looks like you're not really being effective. So within that effort, you need to have some branded programs, and it turns out that it's more difficult in the environmental area than it is in the social area to do that. And I mean, there's certainly exceptions. Patagonia, for example, is a branded program to take back clothing and to refurbish them and so forth. And that's a good example of a branded signature program for Patagonia that's environmentally directed, but a lot of companies struggle to do that. And so it's sometimes more useful to think of a program that is directed at a social program like inequality or health or self-esteem or something like that. So even though the environmental element in social effort is very important, and it's and even if it's effective, it may not always have the right brand. But there is another option, and that is you can brand the whole social program, and if you do that, then you have a vehicle to communicate, because it's really hard to communicate without a brand.
I have one more question coming in. It is from Mr. R.K. Gautam. He's asking, how can social value be brought up front and center with purpose-driven branding when organizations, especially the startups, are looking only at the valuation instead of value?
Well, that's why I argue that you want to have a social program that at least has a component that helps the brand, that helps the business by helping the business brand, that gives the business energy, an image lift, an engagement lift. And so therefore, it's not an idea that we're taking money away from the business. It's part of the business. And there was Google had a really effective program to reduce food waste. Mm-hmm. And when Google was downsizing, they eliminated that program. And if they had that program was tied into their business strategy, it would have been they wouldn't ask it to leave. When Dove is downsizing a bit and in a tough time, they will not drop the Real Beauty program because it's actually driving their strategy.
So these examples are not very encouraging when we see, big giants like Google or Dove dropping some of these programs when the times get tougher.
Dove's not dropping that program.
It did just downsize that, right?
No, not Dove.
Okay.
No, the reason they didn't is because it's driving Dove's whole business.
Got it. So since you mentioned Patagonia, one point that I wanted to mention, that's a great example actually, that was don't buy this jacket. They had this campaign where they were actually suggesting to not buy a jacket, and that drove their sales much higher. And that's a very clear example of how customers respond to an organization when there is a situation like this. Despite the organization saying that don't buy this jacket, still there are more and more people coming drawn to it. So any comments on that example, since you mentioned Patagonia in specific?
Yeah, it was a very dramatic ad. But, if anybody else said that, they would think, oh, yeah, you're just trying to sell us something. You have hidden motives. But yes, for Patagonia, it was a natural part of their whole value system that they've lived for 4 decades and more. So it's such an authentic part of Patagonia that the people that are loyalists for Patagonia, their customers, their loyal customers, they really feel that's a very natural part of what they do. And it was such a dramatic statement that it gives that visibility and energy, which you always need.
Absolutely. And for, given the fact that sustainability and climate change, I'm from the background which is at the intersection of sustainability, marketing, and climate change. And I feel sustainability is a way of life. And it is the sustainable development goals, and everything related to sustainability has a long term vision in terms of, like, that's how you should be living even after we have averted the climate threat. Despite that, beyond that timeline also, sustainable lifestyle is the right way to live. However, when it comes to climate change, it is something which is urgent, which is something like a threat staring at our face. And most of the work which is focused on averting climate crisis is time bound. Like, you have to react and respond early. Within next 7 years, you have to do something about it. And as a business community, how do you think brands can be built around averting some of this climate crisis? Because there are some new companies coming up with innovations and solutions that have the capability, if scaled to the right extent, they can actually save the entire mankind from this crisis.
Well, there's two kinds of companies. One is companies that make products that in and of themselves help the environment. Like they make windmills, or they make electric cars, or they make healthy food, or something. And these companies, then the business and the social effort is combined. It's the same. Now, the trouble with such companies is that it's complicated. You know, if you make an electric car, it saves some energy. However, the electricity you put in the car, it might be created by some plant that is using very dirty fuel. And so you have to look at the second order effects, the third order effects, to get a legitimate view as to actually, whether your program is helpful or not. Even cutting down, even planting trees. If you plant them in the wrong place or the wrong type, could do more harm than good. So you have to really analyze these. It's really complicated. But the second kind of firm are those that make something that is not directly going to help the environment or society. And for these, then they need to do something like Dove did. They need to develop a program, something like Patagonia did. Develop a program that can really help and is justified because it helps the business. So you don't have to develop your own program. You might adopt a nonprofit that is very successful and has got a great brand, like Thrivent, the financial services company in the States, one of the top 500 companies in the States. They adopted Habitat for Humanity 17 years ago. And so that's their signature program. And their 2 million customers and members of Thrivent community, they spent a good chunk of their social effort building or refurbishing homes in Africa and elsewhere. And over 17 years, they've had over 7 million hours of volunteering. They've raised $300 million. And everybody at Thrivent, all these members, all their customers recognize that that's Thrivent's signature program. And so everything that Habitat does for the environment is part of the Thrivent effort. I mean, Thrivent is financial services. It's pretty hard for financial services to directly help the climate change. They can direct their investment a little bit, but it's necessary for them to really make a difference to adopt a program like Habitat for Humanity.
That's a very good example, actually. And if we have such models, because we are in the age and era where a lot of collaboration is required between the business entities as well as the civil society organizations, so that the common purpose is achieved collectively. because businesses starting up totally on their own to set up a foundation and creating a signature program all by themselves might take some time. However, there are existing programs and non-profits out there that can actually be, connected and joined hands with.
Yeah.
Great. So I have one more question here from somebody called Manish Dabkara. If someone go for purpose-driven branding, should they incorporate both environment and social programs in a single campaign? Will it have an effective impact considering your thoughts on both programs? Will it have an effective impact considering, so they're asking if we should combine the two environment and social programs into one single campaign or they should be kept separate?
Well, first of all, what you should do is try to decide what social problem are you going to address. Is it going to be the environment? Is it going to be inequality? Is it going to be self-esteem? And or maybe what two you're going to do, and then develop effective efforts to actually do something that's meaningful in those areas. And so I would think that if you had two programs that were quite different, they would be operated separately. And most companies, a lot of companies will have maybe a dozen programs that sort of are impressive, inspiring to maybe a small part of their customer base, but altogether they reach most of the customers. I'll make one more comment, and that is that some people have a business purpose that includes the social, because their business strategy is naturally includes a social objective. Like Tesla is trying to accelerate the movement to electric vehicles to save carbon emissions. So that's a business purpose, and it's a social purpose, all together. But other companies, it's more effective to separate the two. So you can have a business purpose, like Salesforce has a business purpose to a new way to connect customers with their firms with their customers, but they also have a social purpose that it means that something like software is good for mankind or something. So the social purpose is distinct from the business purpose, and then it gives both more freedom to be effective and to be true representations of what the business strategy is going forward.
Very well said. And I've seen many such examples where, people have tried combining the two, and that gave very mixed message to the end consumers, and they started doubting the authenticity and the whole, what I should say, ethics behind driving a social campaign or environmental campaign of that sort. So I do agree. I think it is always good idea to separate the two and keep it on different tracks altogether.
I don't think some firms don't need two. I mean, some firms, the business purpose includes a social purpose, like Tesla.
Right.
But other firms, it's helpful to separate them two, and to have a social purpose and a business purpose.
What is your take on HUL, Unilever's program on, hand wash? You know that they have done a massive campaigning on, and that was driving their direct business towards the, sales of this hand wash through the hand wash program. So
yeah, well, Lifebuoy has had hand washing for a century, since they were formed. They were formed as a soap to help fight cholera in old England in 1890 or something. So they've always had hand washing, but about 10 years ago, they said that in India that wasn't as effective as it could be. So they made a decision to formalize and make the hand washing sort of more professional, and introduce it into schools. And they gave it a brand name, Help a Child Reach 5, because 2 million children die before the age of 5. And so with this new brand and this new program, their effectiveness went way up. And they've created a video in 3 villages to show what happened to some of the people there when they introduced the program. And those videos got 44 million views. 44 million views. Again, this is a bar soap. Lifebuoy is a bar soap. They got 44 million views. So you can imagine not only what that did to their effort to reduce the deaths of kids by better hygiene, but what it did for the Lifebuoy soap, give it so much energy, so much an image lift, and even involvement, because a lot of people got involved in helping teachers, put these programs into effect.
And I do remember seeing, an important chapter devoted for the digital strategies for purpose-driven branding, as well as branding in general also. So, given the day and age we are in, how do you suggest people could leverage technology and especially the digital presence in, fortifying their brands?
Well, I think communication today is it's all about digital. I mean, over half of most communication budgets now go into digital, and so it's got to be an important part of your thing. But to me, digital is a matter of breaking through the media clutter and information overload. And to me, the way to do that, you have to have stories. And I wrote this book called Creating Signature Stories, and it's about why you need stories to break through the clutter. And you put out a sort of descriptive advertisement of why your brand is so great and what it attributes, and everybody ignores it. Nobody reads it. And if it's on social or elsewhere, they don't pay it. And if they do notice it, they will counter argue. They'll say, yeah, but. And so stories, they don't counter argue stories, and stories get noticed, stories get remembered. And so I advocate to be effective in the social world. Think stories.
And do you think we have enough number of stories, even when it comes to picking up examples on purpose driven branding? I think some of the most common candidates that come to mind are Patagonia, Tesla, and so on. We do not have enough case studies and examples to refer. So why do you think that's the case?
Well, first of all, a lot of firms sort of don't have interesting stories until they develop good social programs, and they're a good source of stories. But when you look at people that are running social programs, they're usually under-resourced. They're overextended, the management, and they're under-resourced in terms of marketing talent or storytelling talent. And so it's hard for them to find stories. It's hard for them to turn those stories into powerful communication vehicles. It's hard for them to place those vehicles because they're sort of too busy just making the social program, run and get and so forth. So it turns out it's not easy to do that. It's easy for me to say, but it's not so easy to do it. There's not very many people like Lifebuoy that have been able to create these such powerful stories that people will share them on social media and they'll get wide exposure.
And why do you think most of the people struggle with? I know that one of the points that you just said is they do not have, it's not that easy as we say, and not having any good social programs also contributes to not having enough good stories. But do you think there can be something as a sort of best practice that can be adopted by firms and organizations to get into this culture of positive story capture as well as storytelling? And how can they break through the media clutter, which is currently having so much out there? I mean, look at the kind of media channels on the digital forum. We have all sorts of content taking rounds, so getting some kind of attention in the minds of the consumer through that clutter becomes extremely difficult for an authentic brand.
Well, it's a matter of allocating resources, people, and creative people that can put the stories together. You need people that can find stories, and you need people that can put them into a professional format. And so you have to have such, or create such people in your organizations, and you have to have goals and so on. And one danger is that occurs apparently in B2B companies who are generally pretty good at developing a library of stories, but the stories they develop are often very superficial, and they take out the tension, they take out all the interesting parts, the detail, and they just say things like, our customer, had this application and it turned out great, and he thinks we're wonderful, and that's a story, and that's not a story that pops out.
So when it comes to companies that are operating both in B2B and B2C space, especially those who are currently, say, having good presence in B2B space but want to venture into B2C space, what kind of stories will make them, appeal to this new target audience?
Well, stories can come from all sorts of sources. It can be a founder story, something that happened early in the days of the country that reflects on their value proposition and their values. It can be an employee story. It can be a customer story. It can be a product story. It can be a process story. And so there's all kinds of sources of stories, but what you're looking for, stories that pop, that have a depth, that are intriguing, that involve people, and they usually involve some kind of a person that you get to know, and he's interesting, and he's overcome some challenge, and so anyway, that's
Yeah.
that's a
So
challenge.
So one question which is very related to this, and often that has been asked, is when it comes to organizations that are operating in B2B space, do they really need to create a connect with the uh, general community? I mean, the layperson who is just knowing about the brand but may not be using the product directly, may not be a direct consumer as such. So should they care about that as a stakeholder?
Should they care about their customers, their customer's customer? Is that what your question is?
My question is, companies that are operating in business to business, B2B space,
Yeah.
they also care about the consumers, end consumers, whom they are not directly catering to, who are just part of the general community that they are serving. But they are not these end consumers are not directly their customers. So should they care about them in crafting their branding?
Yeah, of course. There's a company in Germany that has a program in which they award a prize for the ability to help the environment. This company makes sort of devices that control temperature and help people use energy more efficiently. So they have one set of awards for their customers. And so firms show how they took their components and they created a process or a system that really saved energy. And then they have another set of awards for the customers of those firms, and how their customer program was such that it helped this end user create energy savings. And so they had hundreds of submissions, and the finalists went to their home office and had a ceremony and got a financial prize, and not only that, but they got the publicity of winning this award. So the customers of this company all wanted to be perceived as environmentally leaders, and so this award helped them. So it was kind of a win-win-win.
Very interesting. That's a, I mean, worth, emulating example for many B2B companies here. So one more question, which more relates to companies like BuzzOnEarth that are operating at an ecosystem level. So, there is often a saying that everybody's problem happens to become nobody's problem. So, and sustainability and climate change has been often regarded as that because it is such a wide and complex issue that no such stakeholder owns it completely, saying that this is my problem. So when it comes to even convincing investors and trying to create those pitches where you are trying to say that, oh, you are solving this problem and that is how you will be doubling your profits and growing your market in so and so time and getting this kind of valuation. So putting that story out is not that straightforward when you're dealing with an ecosystem level issue. However, having said that, we do need organizations that work at an ecosystem level. And I'm saying this is for profit organizations, not. So we do have civil society organizations, not for profit organizations that are trying to solve some of these issues, and they're dependent on the grants. But when it comes to organizations working at an ecosystem level, but they are for profit organizations, what kind of brand building should they support, and what kind of social programs will help them communicate this impact to the larger audience and get the right conversation started from there?
You mean these are nonprofits, right?
No, these are for profits. So for profit organizations working on ecosystem level problems.
Well, what I believe is that these programs need branded signature programs within their they might have a broad scope in terms of their effort, but they need some real focused branded signature programs, because without them, it's going to be very hard to communicate their passion and their commitment and their effectiveness. And so I think that's often missing. They think that that it, if they do 100 different little programs and they seem to have made a cumulative effect, that they're done. But it's really, usually it's important to communicate what they're doing. It not only is it to communicate so that they benefit some business that will give them support, but also so the program itself will thrive, because the program needs a brand in order to inspire and guide and connect. And so the program needs a brand, and then within the program they need branded signature programs, in my view, to be most effective.
And coming to the book that you have written, The Power of Purpose-Driven Branding, what are some of the key takeaways that you would like to share with our audiences? Because this is one of the vital books, I think, that almost every organization and all marketing teams should have a copy of. And it is extremely important to get the essence of the right kind of brand building exercise. So,
well, I think the first thing is that we have serious social problems, starting with climate change and resource depletion and inequality and so on. And business has to step up. And I think everybody kind of accepts that. The second thing is that when they step up, it's really important for their social programs to not only impact the social problem, but also to elevate a business, to enhance a business. And third, the way to do that is to have signature social programs that are branded and that are credible, that inspire, and that are communicatable, and they should be used to give the business an energy lift, an image lift, and an engagement lift. And when they do that, then the fourth thing is that they will find the business will then have an incentive to provide resources and endorsement back to the social program, which will make it stronger and enable them to help the business even more. And so it becomes a flywheel.
That's very good, insight that we are drawing upon. And since I have read the book, I think there is much more wisdom and a lot of strategies and insights that, we can all learn from. And I would definitely request everyone in the audiences and listening to our discussion today to get a copy of that and see how you can, use the power of purpose-driven branding to build your own organizations and leapfrog the growth trajectory.
Yeah, actually, several of my books, including this one, will be soon available in an Indian edition with some Indian case studies and a price that's compatible with Indian books. So the first one is the future of purpose-driven branding, and then the second will be the owning game-changing subcategories, and the third is going to be Aaker on branding. And so during the course of this coming 6 or 8 months, all those books will be out in India.
Great. We look forward to that. Before we we have almost come to the conclusion of this session. Just one more question. Some brands brazenly exploit the social sentiments like climate anxiety, for example, and take business advantage out of them. How should the customers respond to such unethical practices?
Well, I think that that's a really good question. I think that if you agree with me that a social program has to help a business, then you're faced with the problem that customers and others may feel that your social program is only in it so you can sell more. It's cynical. It's not designed to help anybody. And the way you combat that is to be authentic. And that usually means that you have a long-term commitment. It's not short-term. And when you have a long-term commitment, they'll see that that's really what you believe in. And you have to have passion and really an intensity of interest in this, and that shows through. And the third thing is to be a thought leader, to be somebody that really understands the basic problem. And that too shows through. If you do things that indicate that you really understand and you're doing innovation in your social program because you do understand the details of the problem, that too will show that you're really authentic and it's not just for show.
Great. And before we just leave, any final concluding thoughts from your end so that we have a good cap to the session?
No, I'm just glad to be here. I must say that in the last year, I've really become close to the Indian audience, and I've had a lot of opportunities to be exposed. And so I'm just delighted that my ideas are catching hold in India.
Absolutely. India has been actually, I would say, a bit laid back when it comes to marketing and branding. Traditionally, this has been a land of a lot of good wisdom and ideas. However, marketing branding was one concept which was not as much, ever experimented with. But now I think this is catching up soon. And with the more connected communities and a digitized world, I think even the bottom of the pyramid in India is now catching up on developing content and creating strategies and trying to have a voice through the content. So branding is not just limited to organizations alone. It has reached to a lot of individuals and folks who are trying to use their voice to create change, the most fundamental level. So thank you so much, and really happy to have you here today. Thank you all for joining us today. Dr. Aaker, this is really very insightful, and all of our audiences are hugely benefited from the wisdom that you've shared with us today. Really, this is invaluable for us. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you.